Evening. Have you been enjoying these dark nights and going out and taking photographs of beautifully floodlit buildings and townscapes and all that stuff at, not snail trails, car trails and everything on the roads? And it's been really exciting. You get home and found that the film was black, in spite of your real careful measuring of every possible parameter of exposure. You're suffering from reciprocity failure. Don't worry, we've got some pills somewhere. Or not. Let's have a look and see what reciprocity failure is, and probably how we ignore it. Right, you're back. Okay, sorry about the titles. Don't know what they're like because the good doctor offered to do them and occasionally we have to let him. I'm sat off to one side because we're going to put maths up there. Really apologise for that. Maths. Don't like maths. Reciprocity, simply defined, is the state of being reciprocal. So you kind of do that. If you're sat there and both sides are equal and one side goes up, this side goes down to compensate. The simple formula there, A times B equals C. And from that we can derive C over A equals B. C on B equals A. We always get an evenness. It's very useful for exposure. What is our dose of light? Shall I be really naughty? Shall I use the R word? Radiation. Light is a form of radiation. It has all the characteristics of whatever you get out of your favourite nuclear device. It's don't say the microwave. It's slightly different. It contains particles in the form of photons. It's an electromagnetic part of the electromagnetic spectrum. Light is a really good example of radiation being useful. We measure our exposure in, well, we can measure it, and we would, if I'd remembered my light meter, measure it in lux seconds. That's how many lux fall on me in 1 second, or how many lux fall on me in 10 seconds, or about half an hour usually. If we need more, or if we have more lux piling out of the light source, we need less time to get the same exposure, and that's where the reciprocal bit comes in. What happens with film is it obeys the reciprocal law very, very well between limits, and the limits are usually in the manufacturer's data. It's usually something like between 1/10,000th of a second and 1 second. Your film will behave perfectly. Anything less than that and it'll start getting grumpy. If you try exposing it at 100,000ths of a second, it's not going to work the way you expect. It's going to do something really, I've never had a camera that will expose that fast. If you expose it for more than a minute, again, it sort of it seems to lose sensitivity. It says, oh no, I'm not sure about this, I'm going on strike. Because we're normally exposing long exposures at night, the theory is that there are fewer photons around, and it takes a certain number of photons to excite the light sensitive crystals in the film, usually a silver halide. They need to be beaten into submission to make them work properly, and the low number of photons don't beat them sufficiently to make them work, so we have to have a longer exposure. There are formula for this. That is an horrendous formula, and like most of them, it doesn't work. It only works again within certain parameters with certain film. Excuse me. Oh dear. The best thing to do is to get the manufacturer's data sheet and read off that, and that will give you a guide to reciprocity failure and how to cope with it. You'll say, okay, if you're exposing for 30 seconds, double it. If you're exposing for a minute, treble it. If you're exposing for 2 minutes, make it 20. It's amazing how quickly the film, how badly the film can fail according to some manufacturers. Do that, try that, test it. And if it doesn't work, adapt it slightly. When I say slightly, you're working with really long exposures, so the margin of error, like if you're looking at a thousandth of a second and you're half a second out, yeah, I mean that's it. Gross. Like massive overexposure. You've overexposed about 500 times. If you're working with an exposure of 2 minutes and you're 10 seconds out, nobody's going to notice. It's kind of like stand development for exposure. It's really good. If you want to, try doing some portraits like that. If you get a good one, send it in, we'll have a look. Reciprocity failure is not to be scared of. There's quite a lot of it on the internet, and there's quite a lot that terrorizes people and is designed to terrorize people, like these nasty big formulas. The manufacturer's guidelines tend to be 1.5 times. Increase exposure by 1.5 times. So if it's a 1 minute exposure, increased by 1.5, it's 90 seconds. That's 1.5 minutes as opposed to 1 minute. It's really that easy. And because of the huge margins of error available, you'll get away with it. Don't be frightened of it. You know as much as you need to know now. Go out there, have fun, do it. And we'll see you again soon with something else. Don't know what.